Hello. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning if you're on the other side of the world. I want to welcome you to our panel discussion of salt, fat, ashes, heat as a follow-up to our 12-hour performance marathon. First and foremost, I want to thank the team. I'm Eva Margarita, by the way. I'm the performance artist of Salt, Fat, Ashes, Heat. But I do want to thank our team and everyone who produced and collaborated with us. So first, Mateo Hurtado, our producer, Yadi, our stage manager, Bree, our director, and one of our beautiful panelists, Kwame and TC from Enough Media Productions, who held down production work here in Los Angeles. And of course, our wonderful panelists here today, Naisha and Allison. So before we get started with a tiny bit of a talk, I want to present a soundscape for you that is a pickup of all the sounds that we played that joined us, leads to the fire being, to the ashes being. Well, I hope you enjoy Culinary Soundscape.
Kai, kai, kai.
I almost forgot how to unmute myself. um, my first memories of cooking began with salt. My father instructing me how to very carefully pour the right amount into my left hand, pinch the salt with my right, and clap the rest in. I was taught if you didn't dust the salt off your hands at the end, the entire act of cooking or conjuring would mean nothing. Somehow my food would lose flavor if I didn't follow these careful instructions. I had to pay attention. This attention was stressed even more when I came to realize I was only going to get those instructions once. Every other lesson in cooking was just like that, shown just one time with careful instruction. And with the expectation of repeatability. Lessons like that came afterward were more so lessons that came afterward were more so corrections than clear instructions. Every recipe, technique, or cooking methodology that my father handed down came from his own personal repertoire of embodied practices. A pragmatic approach to conjure that cannot be contained by a traditional archive. This is why this work explores mourning through an archive of Blackness and an archive of conjure. That is, my work aims to follow the traces of events that hail a particular becoming, a becoming that is not stagnant, but rather a carrier of potential for reactivation. Or, as Erin Manning puts it, these traces are not inert, they are reactivatable, and their reactivation helps trigger a new event which continues the creative process from which they came, but in a new iteration. An archive has a pull, and its pull is to immediacy. It wants to activate, to orient, or better said, it is always already activating, orienting. This makes it a collaborator in all things taking form. Thinking of it as the event anarchic share allows us to underscore its role and experience, human and more than human. It also allows us to place it on a register of the immanent rather than the transcendent. The anarchive is not something we do. It's something that catches experience in the making. It is something that catches us in our own becoming. Salt, fat, ashes, heat uses anarchives to navigate Blackness in a sea of porousness, a particular spillage that functions as an invitation to open and absorb mourning as an agent for reinvention. As we collectively mourn the loss of Black lives, a sense of normalcy and time, I want to consider what it might mean for us to sit with the trauma. What might happen if we accompany each other in our communal memory, history, and flesh? Our interconnectedness finds Blackness in mourning, in the social atrocities, in familial loss, and in our own embodied practices. I want to push a gathering of mourning as to recognize the communal grief that folks across the Americas feel at this time. Moreover, Salt, Fat, Ashes, Heat aims to remember the processes of mourning in order to best make use of the marvel of reinvention, to reinvent the things made in excess of time, over time. As we often gather around food, this performance asks us to consider what it means to have a history and for mourning to be an agent in its reinvention. So I cooked. My father. Endocannibalistic approaches vary from culture to culture and is done as a funerary rite of passage. To consume the flesh of the other is to commit to their history and its reinvention through sharing. Moreover, Julietta Singh highlights, these approaches to cannibalistic ritual are rarely ever about consuming the whole body, but rather a discrete symbolic act of incorporation, a small act of taking the body of another's into yours. Taking in the flesh of another is a way of claiming it as part of you. This endocannibalistic reactivation necessitates accompaniment. Simply put, it takes two, minimum. Someone to create the entry point and someone else to journey through it. Almost as if to say, where you go, I go. I will break bread and bone with you, for you. For our love, we create a collective mourning. My approach to gathering has almost always come with or through food. Some of my fondest memories, the ones that lay deep in the crevices of my mind, are learning to cook with my father. As an artist who peers into the practices of everyday life, I immediately turned to cooking when I thought about what it meant to reinvent particular processes. And then I began to ask myself, how could I reinvent my father? And I turned to food. In the 12-hour marathon that was Salt, Fat, Ashes, Heat, I cooked 3 dishes wherein I picked just the bone pieces, the residual transcript of his frame to honor the relationship of his 3 children. His powdered ashes mixed into the fritas, the rice and beans, and it was all up in the sauce that went all over the tamales. Each dish represents my father, but also another way of reinventing the body and reinventing grief by consuming it. If you're wondering, because I know you are, my stomach is okay. I did not throw up or have violent reactions in the middle of the night where I had to use the bathroom. In fact, I had one of Papa's tamales for breakfast this morning and lunch about an hour before I got on this Zoom call. It was gritty. As we all collectively mourn the loss of normalcy, I want us to consider this grief as an entry point for assembling, not just the assembling in the gathering, but with the assemblages within us. What bones, grief, ghosts, or flesh come out when we sit with one another. Blackness here still spills, but this performance looks at blackness as porousness. That is, an opening to consider grief as an active agent in reinvention. Thank you. I want to take this time to pass on the
My name is Naisha Solomon. I also go by Badman Nai. That's my sobriquet. And I am a Caribbean woman historian who writes songs about killing men. That's what I do. That's the long and short of it. Originally from Trinidad and Tobago, and I live and work in New York. I'm going to pass the introduction mic, first to Bree and then to Allison.
Hey y'all, what's up? My name is Bree, coming to you live from the north side of Milwaukee. So I am a recent graduate from NYU. Eva and I were actually in the same program, so I am just blessed to be able to help accompany her in this time of grief, but also in this time of healing. I am invested in all things Black, healing, transformative healing at that, a healing that goes beyond self, but can extend out into others. I'm into water, I'm into horror, I'm into zombies, I'm into all the things that are scary, but in a sense, taking them on to understand we're kind of the scary and where the good meets. So in a sense, like where those two things emerge. And I'm with God all day, every day, the ancestors, all of it. So yeah, that's me. Allison.
Hi, I'm Allison. Currently coming to you from New Haven via a childhood in North Carolina and ancestors in Jamaica, Cuba, Panama, and New England. And I am so thrilled to be invited to be a part of this powerful and sacred process. And I'm currently doing a PhD in African American Studies and American Studies, thinking about Black multiracial identity and migration, and how the relationship with the other than human, plants, minerals, water, food, and the relationship with how that is the space for navigating mobility and belonging in the Black diasporic experience. So thank you for, I'm so excited to talk more.
Awesome. All right, we're going to get into that. I just want to let the audience know that we will be taking questions in the last 10 minutes or so. So keep them in mind, or feel free to like add them to the YouTube thread. All good. And we'll check them out towards the end. All right, let's get to the good stuff. So my first question is, considering Eva's intention to draw a connection between the 5 senses and grief, how does grief manifest on a sensory level in the performance and in the viewer? So this question keeps in mind that although like the entire work is about smelling the food and crushing the bone into powder and all of these things that would awaken the senses, how has that still been able to reach us as the viewers? I'm going to start with Allison. Tell us what you think.
So yesterday, Eva was accompanying me, or I was accompanying her through my whole day on the iPad, from making breakfast, making my coffee, to all of that. And well, a couple things stood out. One, when you, at this first question, I just immediately think of the pilon and the action of moving that, the sound of the different things that were put in there throughout the day, of course, the pieces of bones and all that comes with that gesture, how much history is in that gesture of like masticando in the pilon in whatever size, and that no matter what was happening, when that sound would happen, I would sort of snap to full attention. And so that was one of the things that really, on a sensory level, like there was in that rhythm and in the scraping noise, in the in all that it sort of evoked, it always sort of landed in my body. And if I, whatever I was doing, it kind of brought me back into the moment that Eva was in, that we were all in with her.
I see you nodding emphatically. Bree, tell us what you think.
I definitely think sound was one of the things that really cued me into what was going on and like what this process symbolized. I feel like with so much death being passed around between all of us at this moment, and how often it is for us to see it, whether it's recorded, whether you're there to witness it yourself, I think it takes a while to land on you in that sense, especially with the frequency of it right now, and almost kind of pushing through a desensitization almost. And I feel like the sound was the thing that kind of rang true for me, to be like, this is a mourning process, like this is death that has happened, and it's not something that you can necessarily turn away from, because here it is, I'm seeing it, I'm hearing it, I'm being told kind of what the process is. So it's like I have already things in mind, in place, that are like, yeah, this is what it is. And it really wasn't a place for me to go to like get away from it. Like, I mean, I could have left, but it was just like something calling me to stay and endure through it with Eva. And so, yeah, I really think that the soundscape of it all, even kind of hearing it back now, is really what kind of cued me into what was going on.
Yeah, there's something that, I mean, obviously it would be deeply personal. And it's like in one way, it's like, you've been invited there, so it's okay to be there. But there are some moments that are like, they're so tough that you're like, how do I am I allowed to inject humor? Am I allowed to, but the support is there, everybody that's there and seeing this experience in this extremely emotional work. Right? It's like there because just out of love. Like there's no way, nobody wants to view something sad without there being love there, right? And I think that's like, we talked a lot about marriages and the performance, and I think that love and sadness was layered, and you could hear that in the sounds. Yeah, Eva, I see you nodding.
No, yeah. I think it's funny of the sensory aspect of it, because I know when thinking about the project, I thought it was important for people to get all the senses in it, the visual, the kinesthetic, the me touching. I wanted you to feel like you wanted to touch it. I also shout out Bree for the camera angles, for making us also feel like you were standing at my side accompanying me. It was very purposeful to make sure that this didn't feel like surveillance, that it didn't feel like a camera on the wall and you were just peering in on my life. I wanted it to feel like you were learning to cook with me. But it was funny because I think the one thing I wasn't sure that was going to translate was the smell. But I'm not sure if people, but one of our production folks here at TC was like, oh my God, it smells so good. And he wanted to come in and he wanted to taste things. I said, boo-boo, I don't think you want to taste this. But it was one of those, but I think it's true. Like when the molcajete came out, like it was one of those things I was like, I hope people are hearing this. I hope the sound translates well. Which is why I also I had a separate mic documenting the sound, so it wasn't just from the Wi-Fi sound. But also even just hearing it back, I was like, oh, that was me washing that dish. That was me stirring this. That was, oh, the masa, or like when I dropped the pork in over here. It certainly, even just hearing it makes me think of the certain things or certain memories. I want to note the one thing too is I had the molcajete was used, at least in the beginning, with the seeds for the sauce. And I just noticed how different it sounded too. At first, I used to think like crushing seeds and allspice was hard, or star anise, but no, like crushing bones, like it has a very particular sound to it that I didn't think I would come to recognize.
Amazing. Another like super layered sensory moment for me. I can't remember what time. I have the time written down somewhere. But anyway, it's that moment where you had the photo of your dad, the larger one, on the counter, and the photo that the Polaroid that you happen to have was he was wearing the same shirt, you know, and it's like,
yeah,
that everybody knows what that feeling is, looking at a photograph of someone that has passed, or just from a long time ago, and just knowing that, okay, this shirt has been worn, this shirt has been with the body multiple times. There's something about that is super, like it's almost tangible that the person was here, because
yeah.
back to so many memories. I thought that was super. That was very interesting to me. I don't know if it happened by mistake. It seems like it did.
I've never noticed that. I had not seen that. I just picked it up. I was like, wait, hold on. This is the same shirt. And what got me was I talked to my dad about that photo, the big one. And he said, oh, that photo was taken like in 1987 or something. And the following photo, that was like in the early 90s. So years had passed and he still had that shirt. And what a coincidence. I also have had at least a couple other moments like that where I see a picture of him at 30 at a park in Harlem. And then I have a picture of me in the same park at the same place in Harlem at the same age. Things where I didn't know at 30 I was going to be sitting in that park in New York. And he said, well, and I saw the picture and I asked him, how old were you and where were you? He says, oh, this park in Harlem, I was 30. And I said, do you know how old I am? Here's this picture of me at that very same park. So something about, the layers of how that shirt came. I don't know, I want to say like that shirt also came to the gathering. But like that shirt also showed up, that energy was still present, which I think was really beautiful.
Yeah. It's like there's a connection between like the sensory involvement and like ritual and all of that. And that's a perfect segue into our question. How does ritual create something new in this piece? There's a lot of like, doing certain things over and over again. You talk about the relationship with your dad and learning how to cook, and there are all of these things that have popped up in your life before that are popping up multiple times in the performance. I'd like Bree to start us thinking about that. How does a ritual create something new in this piece?
I think for me, at least coming to this project, it really pushed the way I thought about how we can mourn people, and what it looks like to mourn people, as opposed to, just the typical Western funerary practices, but like, what does it look like to actually take someone in and carry them with you? And I thought what was interesting about that is like, you don't really get to pick the pieces that you want to take with you. Like you literally have to take it all. And by you doing that, it's a commitment to, in a sense, carrying in their memory, and being committed to passing it forward. But it also gives you a chance to do things in a different way once you've done that. I think that's where you kind of get this Hortense Spiller's thing, where it's kind of like this reinvention of self and like this space in which you may have already been named already, but I think in you kind of like merging your history with someone else's, it gives you a chance to do it differently and to, in a sense, create a new name for yourself. I think it also pushes back on like what's taboo about endocannibalism. I like what Eva said about the reading from Julietta Singh is like, in taking that person in, like that power that they once had over you, or that power that they once carried, is in a sense neutralized. And I feel like in a sense where those relationships do get complicated with the people that, we do love and that we are interacting with, like, I think that's a moment to, in a sense, reconcile with things that could have happened. And provide you with a new platform to do things differently.
Right. Allison, what do you think?
Yeah. So, well, in our pre-conversation, yeah, Eva was talking a little about how it felt today after that and after breakfast and lunch, and used the word that Bray said, neutralized. And when I was first asked to be on the panel and started reading about the work, the thing I first looked up was the role of ashes in making soap, because I know you use ashes to make lye. And it's actually because they're alkaline, which is the opposite of acid. And so then thinking about the role that, the title Salt, Fat, Ashes, Heat, and I know, Eva, you talked about sort of being inspired by the alchemy of cooking. And so thinking about actually this thing that is potentially alkaline or in other kind of alchemical processes. I'm not a soap maker, so if anyone, knows that chemistry more than me, but that there was something about the taking of those in that created a new relationship that neutralized a certain kind of power, but used that power to kind of transform into something else. And so I've been trying to kind of pondering that alchemy. So I think in that way, that's one of the ways I see sort of on that personal level, but then on this collective level, I think, and this relates to the sensory question too, kind of being with this piece the whole day, I found that I felt supported in a different way. And it did feel like grief was being held in a way and was allowed to come out. And actually in a way that in the morning, I was like, oh, well, let me go make this other thing. Like I wanted to keep cooking and being in the kitchen with Eva. And at nighttime, as I was making dinner, I was like, oh, well, I can also do this. And when I sat down, and so I think kind of that it also seemed like this alchemy that sort of neutralized a thing that had actually throughout this time of collective grief, of kind of the frequency that Bray named, both in quantity, but also I think in sort of like a frequency that we can think of as like an auditory wave that's just constant. There was this new like collective support that was created in that ritual that made it feel like that was both neutralized and transformed into something else that allowed one to keep going, because I kept thinking like, Eva's been on her feet all day. I know how tired one is. Like I've cooked all day like that and you're tired. And so I'm interested to hear, Eva, how that felt and what the connection was to the others, and if there was that same feeling. But to me, sort of that newness was like this like connection that was spreading across and sort of like lifting something that had felt very heavy.
Yeah. I think it's interesting. I didn't know it was going to be on that day or yesterday, but the Breonna Taylor verdict, or for the police officers, that being on the same day, and for this morning to happen in this particular way. And then at the end, I finally check my phone and I see all this Breonna Taylor, and it was just another thing about mourning and another thing about death. And I couldn't help but to think that the ritual was also done for her as well. When I usually make these like once a year for New Year's Day only. Please don't ask me to do it again. Like these are special. That they got the first time ever I made them in the fall. But it's true, I was on my feet all day. And usually I might have help here and there, but this time I didn't have any help. The whole point was to last through all of it. In terms of a particular type of alchemy, I feel like it's layered. It's certainly layered. I've worked with ashes or different types of ashes before. But like making activated charcoal, and even when we make ashes now, like the reason they turn into ashes is because of that porousness effect, that all that heat opens up all the bones, it releases all those toxins, and then the thing turns black or gray or whatever other color it turns into. But because of the porousness aspect of it, because we are not necessarily, it's an invitation and a critique of, but what does that opening truly mean for it to happen naturally? But that opening happens in death, when that thing isn't just, you don't just, like, it doesn't just pass on, but it's reinvented, it keeps cooking. and we keep digesting it. And only then can we get into, the then reinvention of it all. I think, like, I loved, I don't know, that some of these things, like, they do take all day to do, but I like the idea that, folks wanted to cook with me, or folks wanted to continue to cook or to bring other elements in here. I think I kept wanting and appreciating all the silent moments when things you just started doing, and like things like the conjuring, the magic, whatever, the energy, whatever folks want to call it, it just started happening. For me, conjuring is really like a crossroads of mourning, spiritual practice, and stage as well. Like, somehow we can't help but to want to, like, misery loves company. Like, you can't help but to want to be seen in your misery, or at least to be joined in it, if anything. And I feel that the cooking at the very least was an accompaniment. The continuing to cook the ashes, continuing to reinvent them in 3 different types of ways, but also to digest it as well, is also a reinvention. It just continues to, there's layers so much, and like, how much can I reinvent this? How much can I process this? What does it really mean to consume it, to break it down, to turn it into something else completely? And if I turned it into something else completely, what if I turned it into something that I know and love most, that my family knows and loves most, that, that people wait for? People wait all day, all year to eat tamales, for something that they know someone waited and cooked 12 hours for you to have that meal. And I feel that, for folks to be able to join in that, was beautiful. It was a marvel of inventiveness.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah, thank you, Allison, for, I think that comment that you made about the ashes, and it's work on a chemical level. It really helps the brain going. I'm just thinking about how just if ashes are alkaline, and yeah, I'm thinking about like a cleansing. Like, usually when you're detoxifying, the body is like super acidic, So what an amazing coincidence that Eva's working with ashes, that on this like chemical level, it's involved in soap, used to clean, used to, look at that. How did you know? How do you know that? Okay. Our next question, and I think this is the one that everybody wants to hear. What does it mean to invite others to join in eating one's grief? I'm going to leave you for last, Eva, but I'd like to hear what Allison has to say. What does that mean? What do you think that means, Allison?
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things I've been reading and thinking about food, and Michael Twitty talks about the grammars of cooking and the grammars of cuisines. And one of the things that Eva mentions, this is a food that everyone waits for, that it can only be made collectively. That, like, tamales, you can't make a single tamale. The recipe and the technique does not have that in its repertoire. Like, it must be made on a certain scale for a certain number of people to be shared. And so I think that kind of collective grammar, and thinking also like about Spiller's use of grammar, kind of really struck me in thinking about, like, what are the grammars that are happening? And what does it mean to invite others to join in eating this grief?
Allison, sorry to interrupt. What do you mean by the grammar?
Yeah, I think the way that Michael Twitty, who's a historian and scholar and practitioner of especially Black foodways in the United States, talks about it, I think it's the rules and structures of a cuisine, the things that teach us this is what you do first, in the same way that we know this is how we put it together a sentence in any language, so that you know what gets combined, and that different cuisines, different ways of cooking would have different grammars. And so they're kind of the structure that are the parameters for invention, the parameters for reinvention, I think, is what I mean by that. So I think the fact that to choose something that has to be collective, that has to be shared, and then to open that up on another level through the streaming of it, where by the end, even though I couldn't smell the food, I had been anticipating it all day as well. And I think that there's also to eat something, there's like a heaviness when you eat, right? It grounds you. If we eat too much, we have to slow down. Our bodies need to metabolize it. They divert energy from doing other things in order to process that thing. And so, and to me, in some ways, like, what does it mean for all of us to put our attention on that thing in order to digest it and to digest it well? Because we know if we eat while we're moving or we eat while we're doing something else, if we eat while we're stressed, our body cannot process that food. It can't take it in. It can't convert it into what needs to happen, and it could result in pain. So I think it's kind of what does it mean to focus us on digesting something is what that invitation means to me.
Thank you, Allison. Ray, any thoughts for us?
I thought about a couple things. One, I thought about, and these things, they're either connected and I just don't know the piece yet. But if y'all see it and y'all call it out, that's beautiful. But the first piece that I thought about when kind of enduring this process with Eva was, I think of the times that I've cried or I've been grieving and have tried to eat. And physically kind of what happens is I notice like the saliva itself gets thicker, like it becomes more of like the thing that you can kind of, I don't even know how to describe it, but like it gets so much thicker. And then I think of like, what actually happens as the food is trying to digest. And I feel like in some way or another, like your body knows that you're trying to feed it so it can be sustained. But like, I also feel like it's working harder to try to, in a sense, I don't know, almost heal you or heal itself from the grief, but also just kind of battling through these different processes that are taking place. And then of course I thought about the zombie, you know, like, what does that mean? Cause you know, at least as the zombie is in Western society, because of course the zombie in Haitian law is something different from what it means to be a zombie in America. And so I was constantly going between those two things, you know, to be a zombie in Haiti or by Haitian law is someone who's kind of been taken over. Like there's someone else in control of your body who's kind of controlling everything for you. And then the zombie in Western civilization is this soulless being that literally just eats and eats and eats because it's being told to consume. And so I was like trying to figure out like what in this context, if we were to be here, like what did it mean to, in a sense, like recreate the zombie by this process alone, like kind of inviting each other to consume, but also be open to being consumed at the same time. And I still feel like I'm working with that. But that was literally just the first thing that came to mind, because even watching a lot of zombie movies, like as scary as it is a collective thing. Like, you know, you get these herds of things, like these herds of people that are dead, that are in a sense consuming the living. But they pass it around, you know, like you can join us or you can get eaten by us, but like it's a collective thing over here. And so I feel like this sacred moment alone just really is pushing me to even think about that process of consuming and being consumed at the same time. And there's this beautiful book called Eating the Black Body. It's by Carlisle. Lord, I forgot his name, but it's by Carlisle. Just type in Eating the Black Body. It's like miscegenation and like the sexual exploitation of the Black body. All that. It's a beautiful book. And even in that context, it talks about like, what does it mean to be Black and be consumed in so many ways than one, and how since the sexual cannibalism of the Black body is like doing all of these different things, even kind of messing with the idea of what it means to consume and be consumed at the same time. So this moment for me really just did like a whole string of things. And that was really just my stream of consciousness.
A good stream of consciousness. My mom and I talk about like death a bit, just like because she's had her parents have passed, and I've seen her go through that and experience that, and we talk about, I think she wants to like prepare me a bit. I know she's watching, so can I eat you? Is what I'm asking. She'll probably say no. It's fine, but I mean, it's not like she could stop me. So.
Right.
Eva, what are your thoughts? And what does that mean? Like for you in particular, because I remember it was about what, at 8:02, I think is when you ate, when you had the first bite.
I'm not exactly sure the time, but I know I was like, I have to make it for 12 hours. I just need to make it to that point.
What did that feel like? What does that feel like?
It was, I think, the most difficult bite of food I've taken my whole life. I had tasted some things throughout the day just to make sure the texture and that things were done. But it was, I don't know if it was cathartic. I wish I could say it absolutely was. I feel like today I feel more at ease and at peace, but that moment I certainly felt almost tragic. I think if I asked my dad, I don't know what he would say if I asked him, hey, could I eat you? Like, what if I just cooked you up? I don't know. I don't know what he would say. But I think if he knew that he was made ashes, and if he knew I wanted to do something special with it, he would be okay with that. I've gotten some support from some family members who truly believe that this is my way of personally honoring my father. And I really appreciate the respect that they have for me and for this process. Um, but eating and having like a camera on me and like there's a team of people, I'd never felt so nervous, so seen, so not wanting to be seen. Throughout the day, I felt like I knew I was gonna cry and eat, and I just like it was like really difficult. That what Bree said was true, like something like your saliva just kind of thickens and you're just kind of sitting there trying to chew it, and like it's not that it didn't taste good because everything tasted as it should have, but I like at some point there was times where I just like stopped and like held it in my mouth just because I don't know, maybe it was emotionally, mentally, or physically, I just couldn't get it down. I never felt like I was like sick or that I was gonna throw up. I just felt like I needed to take an emotional pause, even if that was just for a bite or two. That was, yeah, it was difficult. Like I knew I was gonna cry. I didn't know to the extent. I also didn't want to like break down and like start bawling, but I thoroughly expected it. There was at one point I was like grinding and I was tearing up so much. Some of my tears kept getting in the molcajete and it kept messing with the ashes because everything in there needs to be really dry for it to crush appropriately. So I mean, it was difficult, but I think to invite others into to consuming another person or consuming a grief is more so asking or recognizing that there needs to be an acknowledgement of the grief. How is it that we are all in mourning of our normalcy and we just try to act like everything's okay when it's not? And if anything, taking that bit of an emotional pause for 12 hours is finding solace in everyone who joined in is also in some sense mourning, be it time, normalcy, Black lives, Breonna Taylor, my own father. It's happening. And I think to acknowledge it is at the very least to say we're human and we acknowledge the other, whatever human or non-human, the immaterial, the material, the energy of the moment, of the room, and the energy of reinvention and of transformation. Going through it all is a particular type of becoming. But I thoroughly agree with Bree and with Julietta Singh in that something about that consumption is also incredibly neutralizing. It's to say that grief doesn't have power over me because I can take it into my own hands and reinvent it in any way I please. And if I do, why not reinvent it out of love? Why not reinvent it in a way that others can also join and accompany me in that?
Yeah, there's a lot to sit with. Like I almost find it hard to like jump right back into what we're talking about because there's so much to There's so much, there's too much to feel. I'm thinking about, how your practice connects to conjuring. We keep talking about conjuring and the relationship between conjuring and the traces that we leave behind. Is there something aside from a communal space to honor your dad and to make space for grief? What exactly, what else happened? What else was there for you? What else did we sense aside from like this extremely loving relationship between a father and daughter? What are we conjuring?
I think we sensed, for me, I felt, I would hope that I was conjuring a gathering, be it a virtual one or on some, metaphysical plane, there was, souls gathering. But I would hope, if anything, we just brought each other together. I feel like it's odd to feel like being together now in, the time of Corona, but we were all online, we were all watching, we were all mourning together. And if anything, that too was a conjuring. We conjured a gathering of sorts as best as we could.
Yeah. No, and I mean, it was successful. I mean, it was successful. I don't know how else to say that. Like, seeing you use tongs and move the tamales around within the pot, hearing the crushing, the grinding. We were there. I don't know how else to say it, The only thing we couldn't do is eat too. But I guess I guess we have to, as welcoming as you've been, I guess we have to leave that to you.
I'll do the eating for all of us, don't worry.
We have one more minute. Any favorite moments? A favorite moment? Anybody? Allison, Bree, go.
Just being able to be here, it was my favorite, like virtually or not, just being here.
Yeah.
It's hard to think of one, it's a 12-hour artwork and so many good bits.
My favorite part was opening the bottle of Hennessy at the end. It had such a satisfying, like it just popped out so nicely. That was the favorite part. The cheers, y se acabó.
I just want to read some of your ending words. It says, you said, each dish represents a relationship, memory, and flesh. Combined, they represent mourning throughout the Americas, the US, and Latin America. They all contain my father's ashes, which I personally ground, pounded down to powder in the hopes to be able to reinvent his process and his flesh through my own processes. Salud, or buen provecho. It's just cool, It's just cool. If I may say. But we're at time, right? 7:01. Everybody.
Yeah, bien provecho. Thank y'all. All salud. Thank you for tuning in, for joining us for the panel. Yeah, we love y'all. I love y'all.
Yay.